Most South Africans are unhappy with the way democracy is working in the country. This is what a new Afro Barometer survey indicates. It says few citizens see South Africa as a well-functioning democracy, and they rank unemployment as the most important problem of the country. Let's discuss these and other findings from the survey with Jan Hofmeyr. He's from the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. They are the ones who do the research for Afro Barometer. Jan, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. When I looked at your statement, the release that you've issued after these findings, I thought, not surprising that there'll be a lot of dissatisfied South Africans about how democracy works. What did you find?
Good afternoon, Dan. Wonderful to be with you. Well, you know, over the past couple of years, we've been hearing that the institutions of our democracy has been hollowed out as a result of a number of years of state capture. And I think we're finally also starting to see that in public perception in terms of what people think about the democracy and how the democracy is functioning. General election next year, between democratic institutions are supposed to process the needs of ordinary South Africans. And what we've seen in the findings of the survey that was conducted in November and December last year is that there has been a consistent decline in the extent to which ordinary South Africans evaluate the ability of our democracy to process and aggregate those needs. And we've seen, for example, that 70% of our respondents in the most recent survey has indicated they're dissatisfied with the way in which our democracy works. When we've asked them, so how would you rate the functioning of the democracy, close to 2/3 of our respondents have indicated either that it's a democracy with major problems, and 14% even indicated they don't feel that we're really operating in a de facto democracy.
Okay, so 70% of the people you surveyed are not very satisfied with the way democracy works, and 25% are fully satisfied. And you found that the majority of people feel that the extent that democracy works for not of them is not really where it should be.
That is correct. And I think if one starts looking at the reasons, you've already sort of highlighted some of the areas that people feel are priority to them. In the areas of employment, for example, crime, electricity, that's been a major factor also in the most recent survey. All of those are things that people feel that are critical to their livelihoods, but they are not receiving it, and they are blaming institutions for that. We see particularly low levels of trust in national government, provincial government, and also particularly at the local government level. And we see this lack of trust is actually quite pervasive across the governance system. So there are some institutions that are still fairly well functioning, but what we do see is that respondents generally distrust the ability of and also the goodwill sometimes of these institutions to perform their function satisfactorily.
Yeah, another interesting question you asked the people you polled was about the willingness to forego elections if certain things happened. What was the question, and what did you find?
Yes, and that's quite I think quite a concerning finding for us. The Afrobarometer is a comparative survey that we do across the African continent in different countries to see sort of how people evaluate different forms of governance and the preferences that they express based on the performance. And so what we've seen in South Africa over the past couple of years, there has been this growing tendency of respondents to prefer more authoritarian ways of governance where such forms of governance can guarantee them certain things, like housing, like jobs, and a system that is free from corruption.
If I may come in there, and if you look at that graph, you see 46% say they'll be very willing to live under an authoritarian type of government as long as things work, basically. And that's higher than it was in 2006.
That's correct. That is correct. And so for us, this is the concerning part, because what we are seeing here, black on white, in the statistics that we've been gathering from 1999 already, is that there is this gravitation towards a more, or a preference for a more authoritarian form of governance, because people feel that they do not necessarily get what they need within the current system
or what
of
they
governance.
expected to get from a democratic state.
Exactly, and I think one should be careful in terms of how we evaluate it. Is it democracy as a system that is not working, or is it the institutions, or are the institutions that are not properly functioning? Are our institutions imbued with a democratic culture, and not a culture that is extractive, as many people see it?
Yeah, but anecdotally, one would appreciate the frustrations, especially when services are not delivered. We have an infrastructure issue. I mean, we have a poly-crisis, as they say, multiple crises on all levels in the country. There was another question, which I found fascinating, how the responses came. What are the most important problems you think South Africa faces today? And top of the pile is unemployment. With the respondents, 52% of your respondents saying, yeah, we want jobs.
That's correct. And I think what many South Africans feel is a lack of agency, because I think in order also to determine your own destiny, you need to have the financial or the economic means within a very challenging national but also global environment. And if people do not have the means to sustain themselves, they become dependent, they lose agency. And I think what one also then sees in our broader findings when we ask people about their hope for the future, some of the views are really despondent. And I think that largely has to do with the fact that many South Africans feel that they do not have any agency at the moment.
Yeah. So you got unemployment at the top, followed by crime and security. Not surprising. The energy crisis is also in the top 5. Water supply coming in. I mean, above corruption. And this survey was done last December. This is before the Hammanskraal water crisis and the cholera outbreak. That tells us something about the concerns, the top 5 concerns the country is facing, according to your respondents.
That's correct. I think the one area that has crept into the list of people's priorities over the past 5 years is, of course, the energy question, the lack of electricity. But as you mentioned, the water question is also becoming an increasingly sort of important issue for ordinary South Africans. I think one of our findings have also shown that about 25% of our respondents have indicated that they've been without water either half of the time or most of the week. And that's quite concerning. I think in urban areas, we may experience less of that, but there are some parts of the country where people are far more deprived from very basic services.
Yeah, I mean, political parties can take note of this. I mean, with the elections coming up next year, you've got 5 top priorities or worries or concerns of South Africans. If you come up with a manifesto that really addresses them, and who knows, you might get the vote. And talking about the vote, you asked the respondents as well last year if they had any feelings of closeness. Which political party do they identify with? And in a hypothetical election at the moment, the ANC still comes out tops.
Yes. Well, amongst those who have indicated that they intend to vote, but here's the interesting thing: about 14% of our respondents said they're not interested in voting next year because they feel, what is the purpose if we vote and nothing happens in between elections. Another 9% said they do not know who they're going to vote for. About, or close to 40%, 4 in 10% of our respondents said that they still feel close to any political party, which means the converse, about 60% said they do not feel close to a political party, and that will, I think, in all likelihood, also have implications for turnout next year.
That's very interesting. 63% not close to any party, or they don't know, or they didn't want to share. So that could also be because people are still waiting to make up their minds whether or not first they'll be participating in the polls next year, and if they do, who they will choose to support.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah, so it's early days, but ANC getting 52% of those respondents who say, I think that's whom I'm closer to, followed by the DA and then the EFF. So those are the top three. No surprises there, and it's still going to take some time. So overall, I mean, how should we interpret the whole package of this research? What is it telling us about where South Africans are today, in a nutshell, Jan?
I think the bigger picture is that South Africans are telling us, in terms of governance, the system that decides who gets what and how we are governed, how justice is being dispensed, etc. People are feeling despondent. They feel a lack of agency. They also feel that the institutions that are there, the democratic institutions that are there, are not serving them. And I think that might mean, in the course of next year, that parties will struggle to get voters out to vote. So importantly, in the next year, people will look towards their legislators for the urgency with which they address the needs of ordinary South Africans. I think when one looks at just the evaluation of performance of government in particular areas, such as eradicating unemployment, such as eradicating inequality, addressing poverty, it is scoring quite low, and people are looking towards the efforts that government will be making over the next couple of years. They will also be looking at opposition parties and what these opposition parties will offer them in terms of substance as an alternative to the existing government.
Especially in addressing those 5 top concerns, from unemployment all the way down to corruption. When are you doing the next survey? You said you've been doing these regularly over time. This one was done last November. And I mean, we don't know when the elections will be, Jan, but we've got about a year or so before the general elections of 2024. When is your next survey?
Right. In terms of our preliminary planning, the next survey will be during the first quarter of next year.
Okay, we'll have to wait and see what comes up. That will be getting closer to the elections. Thank you very much. Jan Hofmeyr, he's, of course, a director based at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. They do the research for Afrobarometer. Very interesting insights coming out of this latest survey. Many of us South Africans not finding democracy working for us, wouldn't mind having an authoritarian type of a leader, provided things get done. Very interesting.